Feels good. Finally have all the metallic dragons updated into 5e. Maybe I'll take a vacation. Go somewhere warm.
Hi, Dungeon Dad.
Oh, hey Mimic Box. What's up?
Guess what? You've got mail.
Well, thanks.
Don't mention it. Catch you later, alligator.
Well, let's see what we've got here, shall we? Dear Dungeon Dad, when are you going to do Mithral Dragons? They're my favorite metallic dragon, and I guess you must be saving them for last because they're so cool. Signed, XX Dragons Are Cool XX420. Mithral Dragons? So it seems I got a little too excited about wrapping up all the metallic dragons. We've converted Electrum, Mercury, Steel, Orium, and Adamantine dragons into 5e thus far, and I mean, we've even created stats for Platinum dragons from the world of Abir with the help of Ed Greenwood himself, which I thought was all of them. But it turns out there was one little weirdo who managed to slip through the cracks, and that is something I simply cannot abide. So today, we're jumping back into the world of metallic dragons one last time to get that platinum trophy. Mithril trophy? We're talking about Mithral Dragons. If you watch this channel regularly, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there are actually two different Mithral Dragons in D&D that are similar in some ways, but probably not the same creature. Starting with Spelljammer for 2nd edition D&D, we've got the Mithral Dragons, notably spelled with an IL and not an AL for reasons we'll soon get into. These dragons are also referred to as Radol Dragons or Radolian Dragons on account of the fact that they come from a planet called Radol, or Radole, if you're of the Italian persuasion. Radole is an interesting world because it is tidally locked, meaning that it is always in the same orientation when it comes to which side is facing the sun. So half the planet is a hellish burning desert wasteland, and the other half is a hellish frozen wasteland. And just that little part in the middle, that tiny band called the ribbon, is just right. Mithral dragons tend to prefer the hot side, and are more or less just carefree dudes who like to soar the skies on wings of gleaming energy. They don't really care about hoarding treasure or settling layers, instead just preferring to kind of vibe out wherever they are. We would, however, see them one more time in good old D&D 4th edition. Printed in the Metallic Dragon Draconomicon, Mithral Dragons, as they are presented here, obviously draw on some inspiration from the Spelljammer dragons of the past, but with a few notable differences. First and foremost, they are now Mithral Dragons, spelled with an AL, which in D&D is the same thing, but the big difference there being that Mithral with an IL is trademarked by Middle-earth Enterprise on account of the fact that it is a metal invented by J.R.R. Tolkien for the Lord of the Rings series. I guess it's the Lord of the Rings universe for the Tolkien stuff. I'm not a lawyer, but from what I understand, that doesn't necessarily mean they couldn't use the original spelling, but to avoid any possible infringement, it was just easier to slightly change the spelling of the D&D metal to something similar but technically different. Anyways, Mithral Dragons in 4e are typically found in the Astral Sea. They are described as being even more powerful than Gold Dragons, something Gold Dragons aren't exactly chuffed about, but also something that doesn't come up all that often on account of the fact that Mithral Dragons typically keep to themselves, preferring not to interfere with other creatures in their business. They are blessed with the gift of prophetic foresight, and they believe that their visions are sent to them by the dragon god Io. This now gets into the whole mess of 4e lore, which is beloved by some, hated by others, but in 4th edition, Io is the god of all dragons, who was cut in half by a giant elemental, and those two halves became Bahamut and Tiamat, the god of good and evil dragons respectively. So Io is kinda dead, but the Mithral dragons still receive visions and dreams from him, or so they believe, and they typically choose to try and see those prophetic visions to fruition, helping fate along, as it were. Technically speaking, Mithral dragons are neutral, but they have been known to get involved with good, evil, and everything in between for the express purpose of seeing these visions come to pass. They themselves don't even know what these visions are ultimately leading towards, but the belief is that it's Io's divine purpose universe, and many Mithral Dragons believe it is what ultimately leads to peace and balance in the multiverse. They are pretty singular in this purpose, following these visions wherever they may lead, and as such, they don't usually stay in one place long enough to actually establish a lair of any kind. However, when they do, they often make a home in places that are deep underground and provide access to gemstones, which these dragons use in their rituals to foresee the future. The other place that they're liable to settle down is in the temple of a dead or long forgotten god. They will then spend years attuning with the temple and learning as much as they can about the deity who was once the dedication of said place, ultimately hoping to further their cosmic understanding and how it might relate to any visions they receive. As you can imagine, the layer effects around a Mithral Dragon's residence are intertwined with all this prophecy stuff, so if you sleep near a Mithral Dragon's house, you gotta make a wisdom save, and if you fail, your tiny mortal mind is simply overcome with visions that prevent you from getting any rest, and thus turning that long rest into a short rest. However, you can overcome this by casting sleep before bed as if it were a potion of melatonin. Now, when it comes to their hoard, Mithral Dragons hoard whatever it is that might help them achieve their current prophetic goal. This might be magic items, it could be soldiers, it could be books and knowledge. Whatever the case, they see their hoard as nothing more than a tool to be used for aiding their current effort. They only ever hoard wealth if they actually need it for something, and they look down on other dragons who hoard gold and silver, seeing them as greedy and short-sighted. But even detached from the 4E specific lore, the idea of a dragon who has a gift of prophecy and uses it to see fate come to pass is pretty cool, and as you can imagine, they have some really neat abilities to match. Being one step on the ladder above gold dragons means that Mithral Dragons are nothing to mess around with. They have all your typical dragon stuff and abilities, but their breath weapon is nasty. They breathe a line of brilliant light that not only causes a bunch of radiant damage, but also blinds the target, and fighting a dragon when you can't see is a bad time. They also get access to an ability called Dimensional Strike that allows them to teleport behind an enemy or anywhere within 5 feet of them, make an attack, and then teleport to another enemy and attack a second time, literally just zipping around the battlefield and taking people out like it's nothing. Given that these dragons are also gifted with an ability to see the future, they also get a reaction called Prophetic Vision that functions more or less like a parry, but instead of deflecting a sword, they simply dodge the attack perfectly and retaliate with a melee attack of their own if it would cause them to miss. Their spell list is also pretty awesome. They can, of course, shape change like all metallic dragons can, but they can also cast things like Dream and Phantasmal Force in order to send visions into the mind of other creatures, either to deliver a message or mess them up real good. They also get access to a very fun spell from Xanathar's Guide called Steel Wind Strike, aka the anime Swordmaster spell where they disappear in a flash and do a ton of damage to everyone in the room, landing behind their final target and hitting them with a nothing personal, kid. This spell is basically just a juiced up version of their ability to teleport around and do damage, so felt appropriate. Lastly, I gave them the ability to cast a favorite spell of mine in good old legend lore. However, instead of being able to look things up that have happened in the past, it allows them to ask questions about the future. The DM can kind of do whatever they want with this. I mean, that's always true with legend lore, but I wanted to make sure they had an ability on their sheet that actually allowed them to receive visions from the future in a somewhat meaningful way. Speaking of which, there are just so many ways you can use this creature in a future campaign. The 4E Draconomicon has a few cool ideas for starters. In this book is a multi-page adventure complete with backstory, setup, and maps for using a Mithral Dragon as a villain. In the presented scenario, there is a powerful Mithral Dragon who has seen a vision of many armies from the Astral Sea doing battle with legions from the elemental planes. It's kind of a whole thing. So she enlists some help from a host of angels who were dedicated to a now deceased god in order to see this war started, and of course the players gotta step in, stop her, and prevent millions from dying in the conflict. That exact scenario is all here. Or you could just adapt some of it to fit in with the game you want to run. Maybe the players are even helping her and they have to fight off enemies because they believe that she's right about these visions, and despite it sucking for everyone, they want to help her start the war. Another less developed idea, but still an interesting one that the book presents, is the premise for an entire campaign centered around a circle of Mithral Dragons who guard 8 wells of prophecy. By using these magical wells, you can see into the future, making them extremely powerful and important items to keep away from those who would use them for villainous or selfish reasons. And each one of these wells is guarded by a Mithral Dragon Guardian, but the Dragon Guardian of each well, along with their coatl servants, are being cut down, slain, slain one by one, and the dragons are starting to freak out because this means not only is someone trying to control the wells for an unknown purpose, this villain also has the ability to hide themselves from predictions of the future, otherwise the dragons would have known they were coming before anything even happened. That's a really interesting setup for a campaign, and I could see that panning out in so many awesome ways from there. The villain suggested by the book is a triad of Dracoliches who used to be Mithral Dragons, but it could just as easily be any extremely powerful creature or group of creatures who have gotten a hold of an artifact that allows them to hide from prophecy and visions of the future. That in and of itself as an idea could be a really interesting thing to include in a campaign. On a somewhat lighter note, I also like the idea of playing into the rivalry these dragons have with gold dragons. Perhaps the party is under the patronage of a gold dragon, or even just friends with a younger gold dragon, and they are tasked with solving some kind of problem before the servants of a mithril dragon can do so. They obviously shouldn't hurt the other heroes, but competing for glory in the name of this draconic rivalry could be a very fun twist on any type of adventure. I also really appreciate how diverse a mithril dragon's horde can be, because now, if you have any powerful magic item in your setting that the party needs or wants for some reason, you can just toss it into the horde of a mithril dragon and say the dragon needs it for one reason or another. Maybe the players fight the dragon for it, maybe they can convince it to give up that item, or maybe they do a good old-fashioned horde heist. But no matter what, the Mithral Dragon is definitely going to be reluctant to part with this object if it feels like the item is related to a prophecy it has yet to fulfill. And if nothing else, having a dragon, either as a dragon or disguised as a humanoid creature, who just sort of fulfills that oracle on the mountaintop role is a really fun way to mix up or bestow a prophetic vision. I could even see a situation where a Mithral Dragon is sending a group of heroes off on an adventure it knows is likely to end in their death simply because they have foreseen it. It's meant to happen. Obviously, they wouldn't tell the heroes that, but what happens if they find out? And then what happens if the heroes manage to subvert that prophecy by surviving the ordeal? But no matter how you choose to use this dragon, as always, tell us about it in the comments down below, and be sure to grab the dragon's game stats from the Google document, which is linked in the description down below, 100% for free. And if you are one of my lovely patrons, of course, over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the Monster of the Week Patreon PDF stat block, which contains all the same game information, but just a more fanciful presentation as my way of saying thank you to those of you who support me there and throw me a few extra dollars. Speaking of which, it's time for Patron of the Week, so thank you so much to Dragon of Dice for rolling your support on Patreon every month. I appreciate it immensely. And thank you so much for watching. As always, if there's a monster from an older edition of Dungeons and Dragons, or any other role-playing game, or just something from a story or something, I don't know, let me know in the comments down below if you want to see it show up on a future episode of the show, and who knows, you might just see it on a future episode of Monster of the Week. Also, linked in the description down below, you can find a link to the Dungeon Dad merch shop where you can place an order for this cool adventure zine that I created literally from scratch, doing everything from layout to design to monster stat blocks, all that stuff, as well as a couple of shirts, one of which is the classic Dungeon Dad logo tee. The other is kind of a goofy one that I had a lot of fun making. So either way, that stuff, purchasing merch and all that good stuff helps support me on this channel, and a bunch of you guys have been asking for it for a while, and I tried to set up a merch shop by myself a long time ago and was bad at it because it's very complicated and stupid. So I had someone do it for me who's more talented at these kind of things, and it's live. You can check it out now. Anyways, thank you once again for watching. I truly appreciate it. I hope you had a fantastic 2025, and here's hoping 2026 brings everything you wanted more. Till the next one.